Hello, guys and girls, and welcome to today's lesson. As you can see here on the screen, the topic that we're going to be talking about today is introduction paragraphs. But what's key here is this is not something new. This is definitely review. We've talked about introduction paragraphs a lot this year, and believe it or not, like the end of the school year is coming very, very quickly. So we're again doing some final review type things. Specifically over on-demand writing, because you guys know we've talked about it this year. That is a really big portion of what you guys get tested on at the end of the year on our KSA test. So this might look slightly familiar to you because we actually did something very, very similar to this a long time ago. It was actually before Christmas break, where on Fridays we would do what's called Writer's Workshop. And in the Writer's Workshop, we would review one specific element of an on-demand writing piece, and then you would practice that element of the on-demand writing piece. You guys would turn it in on Friday, and then if you remember, over the weekend, I would look at those and I would give you guys some feedback. And then on Mondays, you had the opportunity to rewrite and make some changes. We're going to be repeating that process again, and I just want to remind you that's because the end of the school year is very, very quickly approaching. And so today we're going to do a quick review over introduction paragraphs, what they should look like, what should be in them. You guys are going to write an introduction paragraph today. When you get done watching this Edpuzzle video, you're going to turn it in to me. This weekend, I'm going to look over those and I'm going to give you some feedback. And then on Monday, you'll have the opportunity to make changes. I do want to say one final thing before we get into this. You guys have heard me say this before this year. The idea that practice makes perfect is not necessarily true. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And so I do want to tell you guys that as I am grading these and looking over these this weekend, I am going to be somewhat particular and a little bit picky about how you are writing these things, because in this video, I'm going to be letting you know exactly what I'm looking for. And then on Monday, if you don't give me enough of what I'm looking for, the rewrite is not going to be optional for you. It's going to be mandatory. Some of you all, I know you don't love that, but again, we want to practice doing it the right way so that when the time comes where we get to show everything that we've learned this year on the KSA test, we are able to show that in the correct way. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you have any questions about that, let me know. I have blabbed enough here at the beginning, so let's jump in here and get started. First thing we need to answer is, what is an introduction paragraph? Hopefully at this point in the year you know the answer to that, but if not, here's a quick refresher. We write introduction paragraphs when we are writing our on-demand essays. There are three parts of the introduction. It starts with the hook, and then background information, and it ends with our thesis statement. We've talked before this year about how if the introduction paragraph were a shape, the shape it would be is an upside down triangle like you see here on the screen. We start off with this long line here, and we call that part of the triangle or the introduction paragraph the hook. Remember, that's because we start off really broad. We're not being super specific yet. And then as the parts of our triangle start to come together here, we give some background information that goes in the middle of the introduction paragraph. And then at the very end, our main point, just like it's the point of the triangle, it's the point of our entire essay, and that is the thesis statement. Let's talk about the hook first. Hooks are extremely important because it's the very first thing that your audience is going to be reading. You want to start off with something that's going to grab their attention. So just like if you were going to go fishing and you are trying to use your hook to catch a fish, when you are writing, you use your hook to grab your audience's attention. We've talked about a few different types of hooks this year. My personal favorite, because I think it's the easiest, is a question hook. So you can simply start by asking your audience a question. That might start with something like, do you think? And then you fill in the blank with whatever topic is you're going to be writing about. A lot of times, if you will look in the prompt that you are given, it might provide you with a question that you can use as your hook. And it is totally fine to work smarter and not harder. And if you see a good question, maybe somewhere in the passage or somewhere in the prompt, use it for your hook. Another type of hook that you might possibly use would be an interesting fact. You could start that by saying something like, "Did you know?" And then I do want to remind you that facts cannot be made up, right? Facts have to come from a solid source. So if you are going to use an interesting fact as your hook, your best bet is to go back to the text, find something that was interesting to you, something that stood out to you, and insert that as your hook for your essay. The final type of hook is an anecdote. These can be really effective, but they can also be a little bit tricky. An anecdote is like a very, very short story that in some way relates to your topic. It could start by saying something along the lines of, "Imagine this," and then you give your audience a scenario that is related in some way to the topic that you're going to be writing about. Again, anecdotes are great, but they can be tricky because they have to be really short. And sometimes it's difficult to really convey like a complete story in just a few sentences. But if you feel like you want to challenge yourself and go with an anecdote type of hook today, I would love that. I strongly encourage you to do that. After your hook is your background information, and in my experience in teaching, this is usually where people tend to struggle the most. The background information is the biggest part of the introduction paragraph. It's 3 to 5 sentences. It really shouldn't be any shorter than 3 sentences and any longer than 5 sentences. But there are some specific questions that you need to answer in the background information portion of your introduction paragraph. And I've given you some question or some sentence starters here. So if you feel like maybe you personally struggle writing background information, might not be a bad idea to jot down these sentence starters so that you can use them when you have to write your own introduction paragraph here in just a few minutes. The first question that you're going to answer in the background information portion of your introduction is, what is the debate? Remember, you have to think about it as if the person who is reading your essay has no idea what the topic is, they have no idea what the prompt is, and so it's your job to let them know. A great way to start that sentence or to answer that question is to say something along the lines of, "Recently, there has been a debate about dot dot dot," and of course you're going to fill in the blank with whatever the topic is that your passage or your prompt was about. After you tell what the debate is, then you have to say, why do some people agree with this and why do some people argue against it? So first you're going to start with those in favor. And a great way to start that would be, those in favor of blank, so whatever you're writing about, argue blank. And you're going to give me maybe 1 or 2 positives that come along with that topic. And then you're going to give me the opposite side. So why do some people disagree? A great way to start that would be, however, those opposed feel blank. And again, you're going to give me just like 1 or 2 quick reasons for why some people disagree with that topic. One thing that's really important to point out here is that in the background information portion, you are not stating your opinion. You're just letting your audience know what is the debate, why do some people agree, and why do some people disagree, but you're not giving your opinion. You will not give your opinion until you get to the final portion of the introduction paragraph, which is your thesis statement. This is the last sentence of the introduction paragraph. It's going to give me your claim and your 2 main points. Remember, 2 is the magic number to remember with thesis statements. So you are going to decide, do you agree or do you disagree with the prompt? You're going to state that, and then you're going to give 2 reasons why you feel that way. A couple of reminders about thesis statements is they should not have personal pronouns. So I should not see, "I think," "I feel," "in my opinion," "I believe," because those words, I, me, my, those are personal pronouns. Also, you need to make sure you are restating the question that's being asked, and then again, that magic number is 2. Give 2 reasons why you feel that way. Today, for your writer's workshop, you are going to be writing an introduction paragraph, so not an entire essay, just hook, background, and thesis, where you're going to be thinking about this topic. Should schools start later? I'm going to read the passage that you're going to be pulling information from to you, and then you guys are going to have the opportunity to get started on this. So please follow along with me, and this is going to be posted on Google Classroom for you to reference if you need to. Should school start later? Experts say a later schedule could be good for your health by Maggie Pierce. Your phone shrieks. Confused and groggy, you open your eyes. Surely it isn't time to get up already. You tap snooze and sink back into dreamland until your dad knocks on the door. Wake up, he calls. The bus will be here in 10 minutes. You groan. 5 more minutes, please, please, please. If this sounds familiar, you aren't alone. Before the pandemic, nearly 70% of teens weren't getting enough sleep. During COVID, things were different. Many teens were able to sleep in because remote classes started later, didn't require a commute, or gave students flexibility in their schedules. But now that in-person school has resumed, teens across America are once again battling their alarms, and a debate has reignited. Should school start later? In the US, the average start time for middle and high schools is a few minutes after 8 a.m. It hasn't always been this way, though. A century ago, most schools started around 9 a.m. Then, in the 1970s, districts began shifting to an earlier schedule for teens, with elementary age kids starting later. This saved districts money because it reduced the number of buses needed. When start times are staggered, the same buses can make multiple trips. Otherwise, you need enough buses to transport all elementary, middle, and high school students at once. Today, we know much more about teens and the science of sleep. Scientists now understand that adolescents experience something called phase delay. Here's how it works. At night, our bodies release a hormone called melatonin that makes us sleepy. Around middle school, this melatonin release gets pushed back by 1 or 2 hours. As a result, many teens have a hard time falling asleep before 11 p.m. If you have to be at school by 8 a.m., it can be tough, if not impossible, to get the 8 to 10 hours of sleep you need to be healthy. And that's a problem. If teens aren't getting enough sleep, it's going to impact every aspect of their life, says Dr. Lisa Meltzer, a sleep psychologist. Indeed, being exhausted can make you cranky and sad. It can make it harder to concentrate, sit still, and learn. And it can weaken your immune system and impede your ability to make good decisions. Given how critical sleep is to your well-being, it's no surprise many experts recommend that middle and high school start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. In 2017, Cherry Creek School District in Colorado pushed back start times for its middle and high schools. Since then, students have said they are less sleepy during the school day and participate more in first period. Meltzer, who led a study of Cherry Creek students, found that kids were sleeping more, and they stopped falling asleep during their homework. Over the past few years, hundreds of other schools have also experimented with later start times. The results have been promising, with students feeling more alert and fewer incidents of tardiness. If later start times are good for teens, why doesn't everyone make the switch? Unfortunately, it's not so simple. For one thing, starting later means ending later, which leaves less time for after-school activities like sports, dance, and music. For outdoor activities, this is especially problematic during the winter when daylight hours are limited. Later dismissal times also cuts into after-school jobs and creates scheduling conflicts for families. In Cherry Creek, some families say they have less time in the evening for homework and dinner. Transportation is another obstacle. Later start times could require some districts to invest in additional buses and drivers, which can be costly, and many parents might not be able to drive their kids to school before work. Of course, early start times aren't the only reason that teens are exhausted. Many things can get in the way of a good night's sleep, such as caffeine, stress, overscheduling, and too much screen time. Still, the benefits of a later start time are compelling. So what do you think? Should more schools start later? You are going to be writing an introduction paragraph based on that passage and using this prompt. Writing situation. In 2017, Cherry Creek School District in Colorado pushed back start times for its middle and high schools. Since then, students have said they are less sleepy during the school day and participate more in first period. Over the past few years, hundreds of schools have also experimented with later start times. The LaRue County School Board is considering a similar policy. Is this a good idea? Should school start later? Write an essay in which you debate this topic. Include evidence from the provided passage to support your ideas. Again, I want to reiterate, you are not writing an entire essay. You are only writing an introduction paragraph. So give me a hook, give me some background information, and give me a thesis statement where you state your opinion on this topic with 2 ideas to support your opinion.